From a no-flying clause to a no-biting one, contracts in club football can change your entire life, so it's hardly a surprise for clubs to add certain clauses to make their relationship productive. And you'd think Barcelona, of all clubs, would do just about anything to get the greatest player of all time on their books, right? No, sir. Instead, they had a list of demands for Lionel Messi, like adding a clause where they asked him to integrate into Catalan society and culture. As if Spanish wasn't enough, Leo was asked to learn Catalan and also included a clause making him a free agent should Catalonia gain independence from Spain. Fortunately for Messi, he didn't have to deal with that kind of a situation. At the same time, though, the GOAT had his own list of demands. He told the club that he wanted a box at Camp Nou for his family and Suarez's family, while asking for private jet flights to Argentina for Christmas and other holidays. To be fair, you can understand Barca listening to all these demands. After all, despite being a massive club, the Catalonians were truly put on the footballing map worldwide by LM10 himself. Meanwhile, their biggest rivals, Real Madrid, had to deal with an entirely different situation when they signed Cristiano from Manchester United. It was an incredible transfer which shocked the world. But did you know that Cristiano's release clause was set at a monster 1 billion euros? That's right, folks. It was Real Madrid's way of telling any other club that the Portuguese superstar is untouchable. Also, if you're wondering why add a release clause at all, well, under La Liga's stipulations, it's compulsory. Every player must have a release clause, and the same happened with Chris and Florentino Perez, set it at a record 1 billion euros. You best believe no one even inquired about Ronaldo during his prime, and he only got his wish granted when the Spanish club were done with him, letting him leave for 100 million euros when he was well past his best. But you won't even guess what Neymar forced Barcelona to do during his blockbuster move to Catalonia. Now Barca paid well over 200 million euros to get that deal over the line. But all that could have collapsed due to another very major demand by the Brazilian forward. If it wasn't enough to become one of the highest paid players ever, Neymar also forced the club to add a clause where his friends would be allowed to visit him every 2 weeks. Seems like a harmless clause, doesn't it? We all have friends, so what if Neymar wants to hang out with his? More importantly, they were visiting him so he doesn't have to leave Spain to have a good time. But knowing Neymar, you should have guessed by now that it was never going to be this simple. He actually wanted the club to pay for the expensive visits too, which were to take place every fortnight. Of course they agreed. The things clubs do to keep their players happy, man. In many cases, accepting these demands is how some unknown clubs get their hands on such superstars. Remember the shock move made by Samuel Eto'o in the early 2010s when he went to Russia to play for some club called Anzi Makakala? Well, you can't sign Eto'o, one of the greatest strikers to play the sport, without adhering to some bizarre demands. The problem for Anzi was, for all the money they had, Eto'o simply did not want to stay in that city. He had no problem donning the jersey, but he wanted to live in Moscow. As a result, the club promised him flights on a private jet from Moscow to the training ground so that he could cover the 1,000-mile journey in only an hour. Unbelievable! While Eto'o wanted a private jet as his Uber, Arsenal had to deal with the most bizarre demand ever. To make matters worse, it came from one of their greatest ever players, Dennis Bergkamp. The pleasing-on-the-eye superstar was a joy to watch, but he had a huge fear of flying. You couldn't get him on the plane no matter what. Things got to a point where he had a clause included in his contract where he told them he wouldn't go to away match days, especially in Europe. The non-flying Dutchman took off on the field, but remained grounded during his playing time, paying up to well over £100,000 in fines due to his phobia. That said, clubs can also make some big demands before allowing players to complete their dream moves. Every person and their dog knew Luis Suarez wanted to play for Barcelona, right? And Barca obviously wanted the Uruguayan, having seen him rip apart the Premier League for fun. El Pistolero also didn't have major demands in terms of wages, and a deal was quickly agreed with Liverpool for the transfer. But Barcelona added a clause to Suarez's contract, famously known as the no-biting clause. Given his history, I'd say it was a smart addition, because when Luito wasn't scoring goals, he was biting opposition players out of anger, and Barca wanted nothing to do with that. Most clubs want their players to act in the best behavior possible. Others know they won't be able to change some of these superstars no matter how hard they try. Full marks for trying though. because Liverpool were desperate after Suarez left for the greener pastures of Barcelona, and they ended up putting their hopes in the mercurial Mario Balotelli. Now, I could do an entire video on the things Balotelli has done, and the Reds were like that girlfriend who thinks she can fix you. They added a good behavior clause, forcing Mario to remain on his best behavior. The clause meant the Reds could force the Italian to leave if he misbehaved, but fortunately, things didn't get that bad. He was a true professional, but couldn't bring his talents to Anfield, scoring only 4 times in 28 appearances. While Liverpool were running around trying to keep Super Mario on his best behavior, Flamengo were doing exactly the opposite for Ronaldinho and his curls when they signed him in 2011. Before I get into details, it'd be great if you could hit the subscribe button because we've got so much more entertaining content coming out. Granted, he was in the final few years of his career, but Ronaldinho wanted to enjoy life to the fullest. The one thing that man loves more than football is clubbing, so he included a clause in the contract which confirmed that he was allowed to go out 2 nights a week. Flamengo obviously gave in to the demands. What's better than having the most entertaining name out of Brazil playing for your club? Who cares if he wants to spend 2 nights a week partying? For what it's worth, he did turn up with some fantastic performances. Maybe Liverpool could take a leaf out of Flamengo's book. Maybe it could have helped get the best out of Balotelli too. The biggest concern for teams when signing players are injuries, but there are many world-class players who are injury-prone. Injuries are a gamble, but gambles tend to pay off really well if they work out. That's why it shouldn't shock anyone that Manchester United added a knee injury clause when they signed Radamel Falcao. The Colombian had really dodgy knees, but when he wasn't injured, he'd score for fun. For a transitioning team like the Red Devils were back in 2014, it looked like a risk worth taking. But stung by other high-profile signings not working out, United added a clause where they had the chance to terminate Falcao's contract should his knee problems return. Unbelievable. Talk about sticking with players through thick and thin. What makes matters worse is that Falcao ended up getting a knee injury and United decided not to trigger the option of signing him permanently. Forget injuries though, sometimes some clubs tend to have a grudge with other clubs over past dealings. Liverpool and Arsenal may not despite each other as much as other English clubs, but when the Gunners bid £40 million and £1 for Luis Suarez in a bid to trigger the release clause, Liverpool's owner, John Henry, was incensed. So when they completed their new signing of promising Brazilian forward Roberto Firmino, the Reds added a release clause of €98 million. Only problem being, any club in the world could trigger it, except for Arsenal. Do you know how nuts that is? It was literally called the anti-Arsenal clause, and the official words read, "If the interested club is not Arsenal." Talk about keeping a grudge. To me, it's hilarious that Firmino ended up bringing that vendetta to the field. That man scored against Arsenal for fun. Hope you enjoyed watching the video. We've got plenty more videos coming out, so don't forget to smash that subscribe button.